Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And I must say, decently interesting ticker this week. It's been a long time since I've had to put up so many decently large movements here. Plex going up 6%, fuels going down 6%, really against my expectations. And even titanium moving up quite significantly as well. So let's jump right in, let's get on the market and let's see what's happening here. First of all, of course, we will start with Plex and stuff, and that's at about 35 seconds. Like that. And let's take a look at the chart here. So, well, the Plex move is perhaps not all that surprising considering we went down by around this much due to a CCP sale, down from around 3.2 million to 3 million, a little bit above that. And here basically after almost 2 weeks we get the recovery increase in price, which is pretty sharp. We're back at 3.2 million on the chart. If you take a look at the JITA prices themselves, most of them are still being sold at 3.3 million, buyers coming in at 3,141,000 ISK. Let's take a look at the player owned trade hubs. So we can, I think, disregard this one sell order. That'll get snagged up at some point, and then we go from 3.3 to 3.2 million pretty much for the sellers in player owned trade hubs like Perimeter, but now there's also is it 4 jumps out here? Matista starting to show up as well with alternative trading. This is definitely, in my opinion, a pretty disputed trade market, the area around JITA. Now it goes all the way up to 4 jumps here. At some point this is going to start more wars, I think. And then for the buyers, they really don't budge that much. Let's take a look here. Yeah, JITA prices 3118, 3141. Player trade hub prices 3144. So that is definitely still at around the same ballpark here, but definitely showing that this one seller is just going to get snagged up pretty quickly. Could have done a better job there, whoever put it here. Kaldari Navy Assembly Plant. I think that's why. So it's in system. No, it's also Moon 4. Okay. So Plex is back up pretty quickly, actually, 6% all of a sudden, and it's a recovery, of course, from the sale that happened. I'm a little bit surprised. I think this must be a bugged volume right here. Let's take a look at the multiple pilot trading certificates next here. So after diving down to 1 billion ISK, that of course recovers a little bit as well, but there is still some pressure. And they're still selling for 1,100,000,000, and the buyers at 1,044,000,000 here. Very narrow margin, and the answer to that is of course that people overbought the specific multiple pilot trading certificate, creating way too much supply for the current demand, which is quite interesting. I personally do feel like this creates or created somewhat of a buy opportunity at around 1 billion ISK, but you do need the patience, of course. So this was really an opportunity either for the people that have a decently long horizon for those few billions of ISK that they invest in there, or that of course have actual use for these pilot trading certificates. It really does give you 30 days trading time for just 1 billion ISK, whereas Plex is still at above 1. Let's see here, we get to do this times 5, yeah, above 1.5 billion. So it's definitely a really good deal if that's what you're looking to do. And as I've said, there's definitely uses for this, creating PI alts, for instance. If you've got a couple of characters that aren't fully trained into PI just yet, this is a great opportunity to get them where you want. Next up, we have the skill extractors. First, of course, which have been hit now by a double sale. That's true. I got an email from CCP that there's a special skill extractor sale going on as well. So after diving down, you could say from 370 million to 350 million or just below that, we're actually currently selling them for 315 million ISK, and the buyers are at 288 million ISK. I would say, considering the massive move here and the move from Plex to actually recover those prices, this creates a small buy opportunity for you to pick up some cheap skill extractors at around 315 million ISK here. Very nice little opportunity, all due to CCP's intervention. Though that is one thing that I feel we should note, these two moves down on skill extractors, CCP sale. The first one is the plex sale, the second one is the extractor sale. Here the move down is also CCP intervention, and for the multiple pilot traders, if it's the same thing, massive volume increase, massive decrease in price, all because CCP intervened in the market. So at the moment the market itself, I feel, is still in that wait and see mode. I don't see the volatility that we're spotting on the chart at the moment as any sign that that's actually changing. Next up, we will take a look at the large skill injector that's actually dropping down in price a little bit. Going to try to get below 800 million ISK. That is of course due to the sale of the skill extractors, which are now a lot cheaper, which means that you can create these more cheaply as well. 795 million ISK for the sellers, 774 for the buyers. It's been a long time since we've seen the large skill injectors below 800 million. Considering the pretty narrow moves here though, I would say, yeah, longer term again, this is probably a nice buy opportunity, especially if you have use of those large scale injectors. Personally, I don't use them. Well, my character that I use has plenty of skill points at this point, and I don't mind waiting. For instance, at the moment, I'm going to be training for the first time for Marauders, so that's pretty heavy skill, but I always felt like it was a very nice balance between training up a skill to get into a certain ship, and then also playing EVE Online to get the funds together to fund your new endeavor. And I never felt that rush to get the skill points now so that I could get into a ship right now. I always felt like those were nice little goals to set and to work towards. And that's something that is completely different now, of course, with the skill injector market, which has very strong demand for skill points. Because despite the skill extractor prices really dropping quite a lot, we are talking, let's say average price here 370, but currently selling for 315. That's a pretty sharp drop of like 50 to 60 million ISK. The large skill injectors are not falling by the same amount. They're just shy of 800 million ISK at this point, at 795, and so that does show that there is very strong demand for skill points in the game at the moment. Next up, we've got the small skill injector, which counter to what you would expect is actually going up in price, back towards 170 million in the last couple of days, but the first few sellers are coming in, so I guess it's because you need more steps. First you needed plex, now you need to buy the skill extractors, actually create the large skill injector to then divide it into a small skill injector, which does mean that you get this little bit of a delay for this market. It also seems like it's a smaller market on the number of sellers here, but now 162.5 million for the sellers, 153 for the buyers, so this will actually have a little bit of a nag down here at the end. And then for the daily alpha injector, that one is also going down in price below 57.5 million ISK. I think it's best not to assume that this is here to stay either. So 58 million for the sellers, 54 million for the buyers. If you have interest, and especially if you have use for skill injectors or the multiple pilot training certificate, this is definitely the time to try to pick some up. And maybe even as an investment longer term, I do personally feel that the most interesting item for me has always been the large skill injector. You've got both the plex inflation and the demand for skill points. Unfortunately, I feel like the fallback here is not really large enough to warrant a massive investment. Then I feel like yeah, maybe even the multiple pilot trading certificate, although it's a tiny market and you'll need lots of patience to be able to unload it at a good profit margin. I feel like you're a bit more certain here that eventually that 1 or 1.1 billion purchase is going to sell for 1.3 to 1.4 billion. But that's just my opinion, of course. Do with it as you like. Next up, we'll move to some minerals at 9 minutes. Let's take a look at those, and we already saw it from the ticker. Look at that, nice little comeback from Tritanium after breaking 5 ISK. I was personally very afraid that we were gonna play with 4.5 again, but nope, nice little comeback here, and we're back above 5 ISK for Tritanium, which is, let's take a look at that. Here for the most representative prices, you're probably best off to go for Jita so that you can get rid of stuff like here. 11 jumps out. Sometimes I think that there's even like low sec traps that show up, So as a result, we'll just go like this. 5.12 ISK for the sellers. First buyer coming in at 4.95, still below 5 ISK. That's quite unfortunate, but definitely a nice little upswing for titanium. Very good news for the miners and the high-ISK miners especially. You're getting a bit more ISK per hour now for all your efforts. Let's see if it translates to other minerals as well. Here is pyrite. Well, you've got this little jump up here trying to stay above 4.5 ISK, but at the tail end here, these median prices are not looking too good. So let's take a look at the actual prices. 4.38 for the sellers, 4.29 for the buyers. Still extremely cheap, below 4.5 ISK for pyrite, and definitely still around the 1 year low price point. I don't see a massive comeback in pyrite in the books here, especially with the supplies here. Still 400,000, half a billion units, another 400,000 units here, and all of this is coming in, even more, all of this is coming in at less than 5 ISK, and here we're starting at less than 4.5 ISK. So there is still too much supply in pyrite to really make a comeback. For titanium, apparently there is a little bit more volatility, a little bit more potential for higher prices on whatever it is that made this happen. Maybe some imports to create big ships or something like that, but it's pretty obvious that if Nullsec mines, that pyrite is oversupplied, Noxium is oversupplied, but titanium is on the edge, and Mexilon is of course the bottleneck. So let's take a look at that one. Next here is Mexilon. Well, nice little climb, went up to almost 80 ISK, is stalling here at the tail end, but is still selling for 76.12 ISK, buyers at 72.57, 56 here. This is definitely a great price for Mexilon. You can see here as well, we're not at the 1 year high point, but we're definitely at the upper part of the chart at the moment. So again, if you're mining, focus on your Mexilon sources if you're in high-sec, because that is definitely going to give you the best results when it comes to the high-sec minerals. Of course, if you can spot some nice moons to grab some Take 2 stuff, I think that's always going to be your best ISK per hour, but that's also going to be gone the first, of course. Next up here, Isogen. I am a bit interested in that, and poor Isogen, you can see here with where the problem lies. It's still so oversupplied that even a little jump up above 35 ISK doesn't last very long. We're playing with that edge again. 36.05 for the sellers, 36.03 for the first buyer, 35.46 for the next one. So yeah, 35.36 ISK for Isogen. Just jumping around a 1 year low point is not great. Supply wise here, still 126 million coming in. Several more orders of 50 million as well, despite these extremely low points, price points, and that does show, in my opinion, that when it comes to rebalancing of the minerals and when it comes to the potential mining that's happening in Nullsec, it really does look like Isogen is the most oversupplied mineral. Pyrite is next, and Noxium is also one which I think is now hovering at around the 325 mark, selling for 320. First one's coming in, 305 for the buyers. So these minerals are just massively produced in Nullsec, basically more than what they need compared to the rest of their mineral production. And then titanium is on the edge. Sometimes they can make it, sometimes they can't. And then Mexilon is definitely their bottleneck, so it should be our focus in high-sec if you want a decent amount of ISK. Now on the Nullsec minerals, we already saw from the ticker that Megasite is still not doing great. So I think that the moon mining bonanza that's now happening in 0.5 systems and possibly in wormhole space as well is having a continued impact here that we should start to look at as being structural. I don't think that we'll get Sideround back to 1000 ISK anytime soon, unless Nullsec like burns for a couple months or something like that. So selling for 750 ISK pretty much. Buyers are also at 750. We're finding that new price range, but I do fear that it's gonna be like 700 to 800, maybe to 900 ISK on a very high point or something like that. But this is just the situation for Zydrine, and that is of course to me an interesting balancing act that the new moon mining activities in high-sec have brought here. It's basically crippled the monopoly of Nullsec when it comes to Zydrine and Megasite. And well, On the one hand, Nulsec I think was very happy when they got the buff to their mineral composition, so that they became more independent, less dependent from HiSec. The one exception is still Mexalon, of course, but now in return the HiSec miners have the option, with a bit of an investment and a bit of risk as well, of course. You have to put up a structure, you have to fuel it, but they now have the opportunity to create their own sources for Zydrine and for Megasite, which also basically increases our own potential independence from Nulsec as well. So it does work against active trading a little bit, but it is interesting that it's not just Nulsec that's been the winner when it comes to the changes to minerals and to moon mining. To the mineral composition change, I would say that Nulsec there was definitely the big winner, because all HiSec minerals just kept going down except for Mexalon. But now here we see the price that they have to pay basically is that they have to share sources of Zydrine and Megasite. They no longer have that monopoly. They can no longer basically work as a cartel a little bit to decide, well, are we going to try and drive the price up of Zydrine? We're the source of those minerals, so we can really decide what's going to happen with it. And now that's no longer the case. There's going to be constant flows from HiSec as well, bringing the price of Zydrine down to less than 800, and for Megasite to less than 1000 ISK. I think that this is also going to end up being structural, as Megasite is now selling for 920 and the buyers are at 881. I've seen Megasite at like 1800 and things like that in the past, and so I think that those days are gone. If Nulsec would try, for instance, to really manipulate the Megasite price by holding off on their own supplies to JITA and to the HiSec markets, well, then that is only going to incentivize more 0.5 systems to become active moon mining bases, because the investment will just be that much more worthwhile, and as a result we'll actually get those supplies. And I think that the potential for HiSec miners when it comes to Megasite and Zydrine is actually pretty big. So we'll see how that works out in the future. Let's take a look at planetary interaction next. That is at 1640. There we go. We'll take a look at these and see if there's any interesting movements to spot. Broadcast nodes finally coming back down a little bit, so perhaps most of the purchases at this point for the new refineries are being done. Selling for 2,150,000 ISK. That's definitely, I'd say, pretty much an average price. Buyers down to 2 million as well. We're back in the normal range and the normal price for broadcast nodes. So if you still need to grab some of these PI materials for your refineries in 0.5 systems, there's actually a lot of them that have come online in Detal. This is definitely a better price to do your purchase than last week. Construction blocks keeps showing quite a bit of volatility, but wants to go up. That's pretty obvious. Currently back at 13,000 ISK here, 14,000 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. Very interesting to see this kind of volatility here in the last couple of weeks for construction blocks, and we are ending above average, showing pretty strong demand in them. Consumer electronics just keeps building on its strength, staying at around 15,000 ISK here at the moment. 15,000 for the sellers, 14,300 for the buyers. Definitely above its average, a pretty good price at the moment for consumer electronics, which, I mean, it's been doing that for quite a while, so this could end up being a structural thing due to the production cycle of structures in EVE Online. But even then, here at the moment, 15,000 is definitely a great price for a refined PI material. It's basically the same production cycle as coolants, which well, with fuel prices down on the ticker, we can't really expect any good news here. So coolants is staying in the 8,000 to 9,000 trade range, selling for 8,600, buyers at 8,100. Very cheap and like half the price of consumer electronics, where if you find the right planet, it's basically the same thing in order to start producing them. Enriched uranium, you know, made a pretty decent comeback, heading to very close to 12,500 ISK, but you can start to see the pressure here, and I think that is due to a lack of fuel demand here. 11,600 for the sellers, 11,200 for the buyers. I think the pressure is on. We'll see enriched uranium go back down a little bit. Also, the volumes are down, so I think this is just going to add to that. The integrity response drones, that one is staying quite strong, still paying a decent premium for the response drones. 2.5 million would be a normal price range. Currently they're selling for 2.7 million and buyers are also at 2.7 million. I would personally say if you're still trying to build some structures yourself, have a bit of patience on the response drones. If the broadcast nodes are any indications, then this will start to come under pressure as well. Mechanical parts for fuels tried to a little bit of a comeback, but it's just not working. Selling for 9,400 ISK, buyers at 8,500, quite a wide margin. This is fuel related, so this is again very cheap and under pressure at the moment. The nuclear reactors doing okay, staying at 130,000 ISK. This is definitely not bad. 130 for the sellers, 122,000 for the buyers here. Definitely a great one to be selling at the moment. And you had a nice prolonged investment opportunity for nuclear reactors at less than 100,000 ISK here a couple of months ago. So this one is still a great one, just as a bit of an outlier with nice volatility, and I think that this is also a structure related spike. So keep in mind, if you see another opportunity to pick them up below 100,000 ISK, I'd say considering the rest of the chart here, it's practically a no-brainer to make those investments. Robotics next. Well, here we try to pull back. This is fuel related, by the way, for robotics. So try to go down to 94,000 ISK, but it's back at 100,000 apparently. Yep, 101 for the sellers, pretty much 97,800 for the buyers. So not a lot of margin either. Specialized PI material does take a bit more effort in order to create it, and managed to hold on to its comeback. So this is not the source of the decline in fuel prices. Next up, we've got the self-harmonizing power cores, which I think are showing signs of a bit of pressure here at the tail end as well. We're trying to sell for 2.5 million, currently selling for 2.4, buyers at less than 2.3. That pressure is on as well. A bit of patience, I think, and we'll be back in the 2.1 trade range for self-harmonizing power cores. And oh, did I actually select an extra product? Not yet. Okay. Let's write one down. Actually, no. I'm gonna check those. Next up here we've got superconductors. Ooh, very nice comeback. Oh, I gotta sell because I actually produced these personally on a couple of storm planets. But you can see that we were meandering for a couple of months, just well, between I would say 11 and 12,000 ISK here. Currently selling for 15,000 ISK almost. Buyers are up to 12,800 as well. Very nice volatility, increased volumes. There's definitely more demand for superconductors all of a sudden, and this does create a nice sell opportunity. So I gotta bring him to the market. I actually pulled them off my planets just a couple of days ago. So this is very nice, and this is why PI has been a great source for information during EVE Talk here. It's different depending on the type of PI material that you're checking, and it has this volatility, it has this great potential to actually make some very nice trades, or even switch your production when some stuff starts to be more structural, like with the coolant problem here at the moment. So it's definitely a very nice market, which surprisingly enough is pretty passive in its production source. So I find this very fascinating personally. Yeah, superconductors, nice little jump up, definitely above average, great sell opportunity. Not at a 1-year high price point just yet, but 15,000 is definitely well above average. Next up here we've got the test cultures. I'm seeing this as some investments being made, so you obviously have a lack of interest, bringing the price down to around 7,500 ISK, and then you've got these increased volumes all of a sudden. These are investments that are being made by players that keep a close eye on this market, and I don't blame them. If you see this nice little bubble here, which was actually with the introduction of the refineries. So test cultures are basically a base material that you need in order to create some of these advanced PI materials, which you then need for structure. So when a new structure line comes out, this is very likely to increase in price, and if you can buy them at a close to 7,500 price point, you're obviously making a good deal there. 9,200 for the sellers. We're starting to lack a little bit in supplies, but 8,000 for the buyers, still very cheap. And again, look for that chart to dip to 7,500 and then try to pick up some nice cheap buy orders there. Wetware mainframes finally also showing that pressure, so we were still paying that premium from all the refineries coming online in 0.5 in Wormhole systems, and this is now recovering a little bit, getting back below 2.5 million normally. So let's take a look at that. Yep, 2.5 for the sellers, 2.4 for the buyers, maybe a little bit lower would be right on its average, but again a nice sign that you just need a little bit of patience for the integrity response drones, because all the other ones are starting to get under pressure. Unless, of course, keep one thing in mind when it comes to all of this. You know, it's April is when FanFest comes out. That's not that long anymore, and that, in my opinion, is going to mean that we'll get some pretty intense information bombardments from CCP when it comes to some of the new stuff that they are planning. And depending on that, we could actually get some very sharp movements in all of this stuff as well. If, for instance, CCP does put we've already seen on CC some new type of structures that I think are going to replace something from outposts currently in nullsec. Not really sure what the scope of that is going to be just yet, but if on top of that they also give us something like a new line of structures that could be used anywhere, then yes, you could obviously have a massive comeback due to speculation on, for instance, the advanced BI material. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. I think that between now and FanFest we could really get lots of movements due to speculation, due to CCP's announcements there. It's definitely something you have to keep in mind. Let's take a look at the Tech 1 chips next at 2540. Like that, and we'll go through this pretty quickly. Tritanium making a little bit of a comeback is good, but considering everything else is not doing all too great, I don't expect too many movements here. Apocalypse slowly creeping and back up here, currently selling for 144 million. This one is just slowly becoming more expensive, but it of course still needs to recover, get back to 150 million. And after this dip here, which was a special event CCP did in the game, where you could very easily earn a battleship yourself, even for alpha clones and things like that. So we had this massive supply increase which crashed the price down, and the Apocalypse is slowly, despite the very low mineral prices, which is what current production would need, despite all of that, is slowly coming back and recovering towards 150 million. The Caracal, a little bit of volatility. I personally don't mind it. Looks pretty damn good. Started below 9 million ISK, went up to 10.5 million almost. It dipped back down to 9, and now it's back up a little bit, but I don't think it's reached 10 million. No, 9.9 million for the sellers, 9 million for the buyers. On the volume increase here, so I think that we could see this as a bit of purchasing for from nullsec to get a Caracal fleet together. Some of these in-meta ships are, of course, prone to that volatility. You know, if they drop in price enough, then a big alliance is going to swoop in, buy a couple hundred of them, move them to nullsec to create a new fleet. Here's the Catalyst after the really nice period where we would get very nice margins on production. Due to the preparations for Burn Jita here, we of course did dip back down below 1.2 million. Currently selling for 1.2 the first one coming in, 1.3 for the next ones though. Let's keep that in mind. And the buyers are at 1.1 million for the Catalyst. I would say still decently expensive. A price of 1 million is not unheard of on the Catalyst. The Drake next. This here is a little bit of the downtrend that I was expecting personally when Tritanium also went down in price. So this might stall at this point, but for the Drake I think it's the picture that shows exactly how the mineral decrease in price translates through to the Tech 1 ships. And why not? Normally I would say it's the battleships that are going to show that the most, because they need more minerals, but of course most of the battleships are in flux at the moment because of that arms race event a couple months ago, and the battle cruisers seem to be the one that have actively recovered best from that event, because they were also hit by it, and thus as a result are the first ones that show the impact of the mineral prices on Tech 1 production the best here. And so the Drake is down in price a little bit, back at around 45 million, it's 47.9 for the sellers, but 41.5 for the buyers. It's interesting, again, we saw this last week as well, that the margin on Tech 1 ships is opening up though, to create that average price of 45 million, which could potentially yield some volatility. Next up here we get the Ferox, unfortunately dipping well below its average here, selling for 47 million, buyers at 41 million. The pressure is on as well. Next up we've got the Hurricane. Also you can see here a little bit of pressure at the tail end. I think that this is just, you know, cheaper minerals bringing more production online for a cheaper price, putting pressure on the sellers. 47 million for the sellers, 41.5 million for the buyers, so not too great. Here's the Megatron. Also here Arms Race Events recovered quite nicely to 150 million. I think it did a really good job there. I actually tried to overshoot it a little bit, but now with the current mineral prices I don't think we're going anywhere anymore. 157 million for the sellers, 141 for the buyers. Again, decent margin opening up here as well. The Oracle, a little bit of, you know, again a battle cruiser, a little bit of pressure here from the minerals, going down from 80 to around 75 million, 77 for the sellers and 69 million for the buyers here. It's basically, I think, unfortunately for the Tech 1 ships, although it could happen quite quickly on pretty big purchases, the mineral prices should show more stability in the market at the moment, and possibly even some pressure, because the Nozick minerals are going down in price like that. Next up here we've got the Raven, again showing that pressure in the last month or so, heading back to around 151 million. Yeah, 159 for the sellers, 149 for the buyers. Did a really good recovery of the Arms Race event here, did below 130 and took only 2.5 months to get back to a price that was above its average. The Retriever next here, continuously under pressure, staying below 22.5 million now, 21.7 for the sellers and 18 million for the buyers. Yeah, if you pick some of these buy orders up, you're definitely getting cheap Retrievers here. Next up we've got the Tempest. Also, you know, that's the recovery process again to 150. Did so pretty well, 2.5 months to get back to 150 million ISK. And then to my surprise here at the tail end, actually going up to 160 million. But I think the pressure will be on. No, 162 for the sellers, but 139 for the buyers. Look at that margin. You could basically almost buy one for 139 here, sell it for 162, and I think make a little bit of ISK on that trade. It's going to be pretty close to that, I think. The Thrasher, also I think a very popular destroyer for ganking. So here we had this little bit of a premium up to 1.3 million in January, and then here we have some interest due to burn Jita, but now back below 1.1 million. Yeah, less than that for the sellers. Lots of supply here, and 920,000 ISK for the buyers. That is something to definitely keep in mind as well. The destroyer market is very interesting when the Imperium is planning another burn Jita. It could be a couple years now. They don't do this every year or anything like that. It's not that easy to predict it, but once you see those prices go up and stay above average for a while, you know that something is brewing. That's actually the time for you to maybe also get ready on that. Produce some, just have them ready, because during the event itself, you also always get a bit of a spike for people that all of a sudden want to go along and do some ganking themselves. The Tornado next. Also, I would say at the tail end here, under pressure a little bit, heading back towards less than 65 million on average. 66 million for the sellers, 59 million for the buyers. Not that much of a margin here. Next up, we've got the Tristan, here continuously under pressure as well. Selling for 500,000 ISK, buyers at 425. Then we've got the Venture, also showing a bit of pressure at the tail end, heading back towards that 200,000 ISK price range, albeit pretty slowly, but the buyers are there already. They want that price to go down. So again, 250,000 for the sellers, 200,000 for the buyers. That's like a quarter, 25% margin between those two. That is quite significant, and is definitely something new, I would say, in the Tech 1 market here, that large margin between the buyers and the sellers. Here is the Vexor showing some volatility, went from 11 million to 9 million in pretty short order, bouncing back towards 10. Yeah, 9.8 for the sellers, 8.8 million for the buyers, though that's still a quite respectable margin as well, despite the increase in price. So Tech 1 ships, I don't think we're going anywhere anytime soon because of the mineral situation, but that large margin is pretty interesting, and I would say that this makes the Tech 1 market prone to showing some volatility and of course potential good trades when CCP decides to rebalance any of those. So I would say if you're in Tech 1 production, maybe even you want some speculation on Tech 1 to do some active trading, what's most important I think is going to be to take a look at what the rebalancing team at CCP is doing, because if they touch any of those and buff them up, then I think you could, on the buyer side of things here, get some really cheap ones and get some very good deals. Next up, the Tech 2 market at 34.15. Let's take a look at those, and here personally I do think that we'll need to see how the story pans out. My personal expectation or hope, maybe it's a bit more hope than expectation, is that we get a second leg down and that we could actually get lower prices towards 25 million ISK. But we also saw that the PI materials are going back down in price, so I would say that most of the refineries that are wanted by the player base are close to being up and running at this point, so supplies should have gone up at this point as well. And here is the Aries actually bouncing back up above 30 million ISK, 31 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers, which is not a good sign for a second leg down. It is on quite a bit of interest here, 300 a day being sold, a little bit of a volume spike here. But at least the good news is, I would say, the spike is not up to 35 million ISK. So if it might turn out that 31 to 32 million is the next spike, then a pullback might actually bring us back to 27, 26 million, maybe if we're lucky. Let's take a look at the other ones. Here is the Cerberus, also recovering from that decrease in price to 250 million, already selling for 305 million again, 238 for the buyers, so quite a bit of volatility. For me, the frigates are the barometer because they're cheaper, easier to make, have bigger volumes. Something like a Cerberus and a cruiser tends to have lower volumes but still quite strong interest, and so this one is more volatile, more difficult to predict. Next up here is the Claw, also bringing its price back above 30 million. That's really not good news for that second dip down. 31 million pretty much for the sellers and 28 million for the buyers. This does mean that buy prices below 30 million end up being potential opportunities. The Crow next, same pattern, went below 30 million, but pretty sharp increase in price back above that. 31.8 for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. Again, not good for my prediction or for my hope. Crusader is staying below 30 million ISK, but it is also quite less popular than most of the other ones. 29 for the sellers, 25.7 for the buyers here. I would say the others are showing a different picture here. Next up is the Heretic. At least that one is staying below 70 million for now. Well, no, actually, sellers with this price point are coming in at 73.5 million. Buyers are almost at 64 million ISK. So we're definitely on an up week for Tech 2 in general at the moment. Here's the Hound, still staying just below 30 million ISK, but not really showing a sign that it's going to go well. Actually, 29 million for the sellers, and it's 137, 34 and 40. It's quite a bit of supply. 26.5 for the buyers. There is potential for that second leg down in the Hound, but will it happen? I'd need to see more data, to be honest. Here is the Ishtar staying at around 250. I'd say that's good news if you want to buy an Ishtar here. 250 million for the sellers, 235 for the buyers. Definitely on the cheaper side compared to what it's been in the last few months. Manticore, again, not good news. Went close to 30 million, jumps back up to 35 million. It's not the 40 million we've seen before, but still 37 million almost for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers. Not good news for my theory of the second leg down. Same with the Nemesis, just jumps right back to 30 million ISK, and this would create this would become the pattern then, that if you do ever dip significantly below 30 million, we're actually in buy order territory. 31.3 for the sellers, 25.1 for the buyers. I'm actually going to start to look at it that way. I might even take some of these gambles. If I see the Nemesis drop like that and go to 25 million on the chart, I think that's a sign that you do want to buy. And if any of the other frigates ever come close to that on the buyer side of things, go close to 25 million, I'm actually gonna start maybe taking some gambles on those. It would have paid off already on the Nemesis. We definitely spotted that downtrend in Eve Dog here, as you could have bought them for 25 million and now sell them for 31.3 million. A little bit of a trade, not great just yet, but definitely something worth looking into if we don't have the second leg down. Here's the Pontifex next, staying above 75 million. Is just, you know, command destroyers, just too difficult, too small a market to actually make any predictions on that. But the Purifier again up in price as well. Managed to get to 30 million. What we would have needed to see is a continued decrease to like 25, 26, maybe 27 million, and then a spike up to just above 30 million. But nope, we're back at 35 million on the chart, 40 million for the sellers, 28.4 for the buyers here on increased volumes. It again shows if we ever see the Purifier close to 25 million on buy orders, I think it's the time to jump on that opportunity. Raptor, same story, staying above 30 million, selling for 32. The Saber, it's another destroyer. Alright, 70 million, just, you know, staying there, 70 million for the sellers. Then we've got the Stiletto. Also, you know, starts below 30 million here, increased volumes, back above 30 million. 32 almost for the sellers, decent supply, 27.5 for the buyers, decent demand as well. But yeah, we're above 30 million once again. Then we've got the Stork also making a bit of a comeback here, bouncing off that 70 million mark with quite a bit of volatility. 83 million for the sellers again. That's not great news. And here is the Taranis, 25 million. Buyers are at 23.2 million. I would almost say for this week, if you want an investment in Tech 2 ships, look into buying a couple of these Tyranises for like, let's say, less than 24 million ish. If the rest of them are any indication, we're gonna jump back up to 30 million and more pretty quickly on this ship as well. So yeah, the Tech 2 market, unfortunately, the second leg down theory doesn't seem to be panning out, and considering the pattern, especially here in the Nemesis, I'm starting to look at 25 million as our new bottom price, and anything below that as a great buy opportunity. We'll see if it works out or not. Next up, we've got the Tech 3 market at 40.45. Like that. Let's take a look at these. So here is the Confessor continuing its downtrend. This is not good news. You may already have seen from the ticker, Tengu 145 down 5 million, just like that. It's not good news, guys. If you're looking to actually make trades and look for selling. So here we've got a massive relisting down at 38 million, and then the competition starts at 37.9, then 37.5 million. So it's just more supply than the market can handle, driving the price back down. This does look quite interesting if you have a know of nullsec activity, then yeah, this does create a bit of a buy opportunity. But at the moment here we are seeing pretty big supply and decreased prices. Hecate, same story. Look at that leg down, less than 40 million now. So, and again 40, 40, 40, 60, 43, another 77 here. So a bit of relisting at 45, then at 40 million, and the competition just drives the price back down on the oversupply situation. Next up here, Jackdaw, exact same pattern, going down to 37.5 million, where the competition started, and we still have dozens of them that keep coming in here. So unfortunately at the moment we are oversupplied. This does create, in my opinion, a buy opportunity. The gamble you're taking then is that something happens in nullsec in order to create that increased price. The Confessor I find is very interesting, going well below 30 million. But here, especially now, the Jackdaw, buyers at 35 million ISK. I think that's potentially, that's right here on the chart, a really good deal if you can pick some of those up. And then finally we've got this Vapel that's actually landing at 40 million ISK. But let's take a look at supply then. 125, another 19, 35, 50, 38. The oversupply situation is starting to become a bit more structural now. It's not like we're dealing with an oversupply this week in 2 of these destroyers, and then the other ones are actually going up in price. Now it's across the board. You've got 50s and 60s coming in, and just not finding buyers at the moment. You can see that on the volumes here as well. Let's take a look at the cruisers next. Here is the Legion, same situation, right? Started by trying to defend 140, currently selling for 132, and here again 60, 60, 82, a relisting at 135, driving the price back down. It's oversupply that apparently someone wants to get rid of and is willing to cut the price by 5 millions every single time. Here is the Loki next. Loki is probably the one exception because it's such a popular and unique ship, but look at that, 240, 155, a relisting at 195 million is also under pressure. The Proteus, You know, least popular ones. So who wants to start selling those at 125? Probably no one, but there's still 280 of them here at 140. So this is just the least popular one that's also oversupplied. And then we've got the Tengu that after a bit of a spike is now was listed at 150, and now here we've got 269 of them at 145. Any new supply is gonna start competing with this once again. And so the Tech 3 market, I would say, definitely not the best time to be selling or to be producing this, but you could potentially look for a buy opportunity at this point. Charts like the Jackdaw and like the Confessor do look quite interesting for that. And then for the extra product this week, we are going to take a look at the Marauders because it's a personal interest of mine. 4420, let's say. The reason I'm picking Marauders is because I'm going to grab the skill, and that's going to be like pretty much my next goal. I think I want to buy a Golem and really get like, I think, one of the best mission ships in the game, and put that in my different bases of operations. So we've got advanced battleships, Marauders. Let's take a look at the Paladin here at the moment. So it's a Tech 2 ship. It's going to be quite expensive. This is of course due to the moon mining changes as well. And the Marauder, well, going down in price just a little bit, but again, not showing the sign of the second leg down just yet. So we had a spike up to 1.9 billion pretty much. Then we went back down to less than 1.6 billion, but then back up to above almost 1.8 billion. And now here we're actually on a bit of a downtrend. 1.656 billion for the sellers, 1.551 for the buyers. Definitely an okay price considering the last few months, but also a very expensive ship at the moment. Next up, we've got the Golem, which is my personal interest, and it looks like I'm not the only one that wants golems, because this is a pretty big spike quite late in March, up to a 1-year high point of 1.9 billion ISK. We have recovered from that a little bit, currently selling for, same as a Paladin, pretty much 1.650 billion, and the buyers are at 1.6 billion pretty much as well. So very expensive, at least at the moment it's doable, and we come from a nice little spike in the Golem. Next up, we've got the Kronos here. That's actually a bit less expensive at 150, 1.5 billion on the chart here, selling for pretty much that price, 1.4 for the buyers here. So again, yeah, moon mining changes, Tech 2 increase in price. This one is actually showing that second leg down a little bit better, right? Spike up to 175. Going down to 153, back up that, but well below the previous spike. And then here we're actually playing with even lower prices. So let's hope that it can actually happen. Next up here we get the Varger, same pattern, going down to less than 1.5 billion ISK, 1.5 billion for the sellers, 1.4 for the buyers. And so yeah, very, very expensive Marauders, used to cost around 1 billion, a little bit above that, and especially at the moment the Golem, which is my personal interest, is quite expensive, coming just off of a 1-year high point at 1.9 billion ISK for a ship. Quite expensive, but it is of course one of the best battleships and mission ships that you can get out there. Anyways, that's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.